Good evening, members. Thank you. I don't blame you. That's what we should be doing, talking. Right. Agenda item. May I take this opportunity to advise you that we are not expecting the fire alarm to sound tonight. So if it does, please remain seated, and Mrs. Matthews, to my right, will assess the situation and give further instructions on the evacuation of the building if appropriate. Tonight's proceedings will be webcast by the Council, but if anybody else is intending to record these proceedings, can you please let me know now? I ask the question not to stop you, but to merely ensure that the members and other members of the public in the room know that this is taking place. Now to the agenda. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Mrs. Matthews, do we have any? No? Nice full house. Agenda item 2, notification of substitute. No, not needed. Agenda item 3, urgent items. This evening, there are no urgent items, but to enable officers to get away home, I propose that we take item 13, the L's in white paper at the end. Would this be okay with members? Lovely, thank you very much. So, notification of visiting members. Again, the room is not full of anybody this time. So, agenda item 5, disclosures by members and officers. Are there any disclosures? Members? Officers? Thank you. Agenda item 6, disclosures of lobbying. Are there any disclosures of lobbying, members? Councillor Burton?
Yes, I've been lobbied by a few members, a few residents in my ward on item 15.
On item 15. Okay, can that be noted? Agenda item 7, to consider whether any items should be taken in private because of the possible disclosure of exempt information. We don't have that. Agenda item 8, we now turn to the minutes of the meeting held on the 21st of March 2017, which starts at page 1. Page 2. Page 3. And page 4. Everything correct? Any problems, anybody? No? Lovely, thank you very much. Agenda item 11. No? I've gone too far, haven't I? Eager. Sorry, everybody. So these now will be signed as a correct record. Agenda item 9, presentation of any petitions. Mrs. Matthews? We don't have any. No, lovely. Question and answer session for members of the public? No. Agenda item 11. We now turn to the committee work programme. Do any members have any comments on this? My only reservation with this is, my own reservation on this is, we may not be sitting on this committee in a few weeks' time. There may be changes. So, two things. I think if we want something to be on there, we should really grab this now for it to go forward. So, if I give you just a couple of minutes to go through what you've got on your list. And if there's anything else that you want going forward, this seriously would be the time. Councillor Mortimer.
You'll probably remember from the last couple of meetings, Chair, that we were requesting to keep a watching brief on the litter from cars, throwing litter from cars.
Oh, yeah.
We were obviously we've got to wait for the legislation. And
yeah.
I suspect under the current circumstances that have happened today, it might become sooner rather than later. So,
Or later than sooner.
well, we'll see what will happen. So, I'd like to see that on the work programme as a watching brief, please.
Okay, so can we make sure that that's on there? I do know, because, because you wasn't there, was you, at the next chairman's bit? Martin did come along and say that they are looking at that as Maidstone Borough Council, so that's good, yeah. No, that's good, that's what I'm saying. If we don't get it down, then we could may not get the opportunity to get this in the future. Anything else, anybody? John? Oh, sorry, Councillor. Yeah, sorry, John. Yeah, well, I always have, so that's what makes it hard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the same one that I brought up last time about the MBC lottery. I see that it was going to be still investigated, so we're another month further on and still nothing. So I think it's about time that something got moving on this now.
Yep. I will ask William, because I know William's working on this.
Yes, thank you. Just to say that the possibility of the lottery was discussed at a leaders' meeting, I believe, back in January, and that then, at that point, it was decided to undertake some survey work of potential interested parties from the voluntary sector. And so we have done that survey work now, which came back, pretty positive, saying, from the voluntary sector organisations saying that they would largely be in favour of a Maidstone lottery. And so we brought that back to the leaders' meeting last month, following which it was decided that a paper would be brought to this committee in June to propose creating a lottery. So we do have a firm date, and activity has been going on. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, William. Quite happy with that, John? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Right, so if that's all, members, then we'll go on to the next item. You'll have to correct me, I forgot where we were going to change. So, yeah, we're doing that one. So, agenda item 12, oral update on Brunswick Street and Union Street developments. Mr. Foster, I understand you will be presenting this. Thank you.
Yes, I am. Thank you, Chairman. Thanks for inviting me to come along. I've been asked by the Council to bring forward these two sites for residential development. We've commissioned, if I start with Brunswick Street first, we've commissioned architects Calvert-Dean and employers agents Martin Arnold to advise us. These are award-winning architects, and we've been going through a number of design iterations and options for the Brunswick Street site. Those designs have been influenced by pre-application advice we've had from our planning officers. And currently the designs show 12 market sale homes, 24 market rent units and 16 affordable homes as well. Designs also incorporate 33 car parking spaces, which reflects the decision of SBNST a little while back in terms of the demand to meet local demand for employers and residents to park in this locality. And looking at the user details that we have, that looks like the right number of car parking spaces to retain on the site. So we've had designs and we've had now some feedback, some almost pre-app, if you like, feedback from the ward members. That has helped to refine the designs once more, and they need to go through a final iteration, which will hopefully then lead us to an opportunity to then consult with the residents in that vicinity, in that area. And we're hoping to do that in sort of mid-May to late May. And following on from whatever is picked up at that consultation, then we'll be looking to submit planning in June or July, depending on how that goes. So that's Brunswick Street. Union Street, the site's fully assembled now. Again, we actually have the same architect and employer's agent for that site as well. Same process, design iterations, same process again. We have some designs that we've had some pre-app advice and guidance, and we've been producing further designs, but now we've got some more advice and guidance from our planning officers, which will mean another iteration of designs that our architects will have to go through. These designs have also been briefly presented to the ward members. And once we've finally got those back through, we're probably looking at a similar timescale, simply because this site is fully assembled. We've still got some site assembly work to do on Brunswick Street. And once that's done, hopefully by the end of May, we've got public consultation completed and planning again June. We're probably looking at, we're sort of in the programme, we've got about 3 months for that, so we'll be looking at sort of September for a decision. As the designs go through and we get more confident, we will be looking to tender for a contractor through probably one of the frameworks, EU frameworks. And then hopefully we'll be looking to get on site by around March of next year. That's the ballpark timetable at this moment in time, subject to site assembly, the further consultation work that we have to do, and the feedback we get from our planners. So that was it. Any questions?
I'd just like to ask one before I ask Councillor Joy. I know you've not been working on it that long, John, and I do appreciate it, but we were worried about homeless people and like people getting on the ladder, and we was really excited that, hey, you know, the council's going to be building their first sort of homes for I don't know how many years now. And here I am hearing it's going to be another year, and I was hoping before I pegged it that the first brick would be down. So I can't say I'm not disappointed. I remember talking about this with the ward members so long ago now, and I agree that they should be really in on that when I was cabinet member, but we're still treading water. And it's such a shame because I know our homeless list is going up and up and up. So that's just my disappointment on it. But I do understand. Councillor Joy.
I'm on now. We did have the meeting with officers, and I do agree with what you were saying about timescales, and we've been there once, we're going over it again. But I must say, all three of us were just so pleased that it's now beginning to move forward. Consultation with residents was obviously high on our list, and as John's just said, that's going to happen pretty soon. So I think now things have started to move. I just think we've got to be behind everybody so that there's no more hiccups and we can all agree and get this done. So, yeah, well done.
Good. Councillor Mortimer. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Can I just... John, yeah? Councillor Bernard.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. John mentioned about parking at Brunswick Street, but you didn't say anything about parking at Union Street. And also, I congratulate you on getting Calfa Seaton. I know them from my years in housing, the housing sector. You couldn't have picked a better firm.
Oh, good. Good recommendation.
Great, thanks very much. Yes, and I'm sorry, I forgot to mention Union Street. Union Street currently has 46 car parking spaces and is a well-used car park, no doubt from residents as also from the people who are working in Albion Place. What we're doing is with that scheme is we're replacing that car park in another location, and more efficient use of the land. But in the schemes that we've got at the moment, what that allows us to do is allow us to build that new car park in advance of the rest of the housing development, so that we've got that continuity through the whole of the scheme, so that the area will never have no car parking available to it. And then we can get on with the rest of the scheme. So we move it from one side to the other side, build it out, and then build out the houses on the other side. So with the loss of 6 car parking spaces, which, you know, on the balance of things, I think that's good. Hopefully that will be acceptable to probably SB&ST when we have to go then and ask for that land to be declared surplus, or some of it.
Yeah, that's good. Fine, thanks very much.
Thank you. Councillor Mortimer, I'm just going to ask you to come in, but I've... Oh, no, but please come forward, Val. State your name and why you're here.
Good evening, Councillor Springett. As visiting member, and it's on agenda item 15. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mortimer.
Thank you. I've got the numbers, John, for Brunswick Street, 12, 24, 16. What are the numbers on Union Street?
Well, the design iteration that we're working on at the moment, which is going to be subject to... Sorry, we've got a design at the moment which was put together following a pre-app, but what I've said is that we need further design changes to it. So we were working on 19 market sale and 30 market rent. The issue we have with that site is it's very difficult to come up with a wholly policy compliant scheme that will enable us to produce the full 30% affordable on that scheme, on that site. Now, I'm approaching this as any developer would, which is what our planning policies do say, so that, you know, if we can demonstrate that we can build houses, but there are viability issues in producing a fully compliant site, then we can demonstrate that to the planning officers. They will consider it to be a mitigating circumstance. So at the moment, that's what it's looking at. But as I say, we've got this further design iteration that we need to do to see whether or not we can reflect some of the further feedback we've had from our planning officers. So those numbers may well change.
Of course.
Quite aware of viability reports on planning applications, and I know of 3 off the top of my head I think of where a developer has got away with putting in affordable housing, let's put it like that, or no need for it. So when this first started, I've been around long enough now to remember it, we were trying to provide housing for our low-income families, etc. And that's why I think the majority of councillors were supporting it at the time. And the further we go down the line, the more I'm getting worried about this, that we're not going to achieve what the actual of these 2 sites, especially Brunswick Street, which are actually going to solve or help solve one of our major problems.
Yes, thank you. If I can just answer that. It's early days at the moment, so what we need to do is we need to finalise the design, get detailed cost advice on that design, and then we can really see what the lie of the land is in terms of the viability of the scheme. So even if it doesn't look as we would like it, there are sort of external opportunities that we can explore, such as bringing in grant to deliver the affordable housing to help the viability. So, you know, rest assured that, you know, John and I are working to explore all those opportunities, and we fully understand that, you know, the delivery of affordable housing is a priority, so we'll be doing our best to make sure it happens. Yeah.
That's good news to hear, because that's why we're here as a committee, is to help out and go forward. So any more questions, or is everybody quite happy? Well, thank you very much, John, for coming along. And I shall look forward to the first brick going down. It has seemed a long, long time. Can every one of us councillors be invited, and can we all have a silver spade each? Yeah. Don't mind, silver's fine. Thank you, John. Thanks very much. Right, members. So we're moving item 13 till later. So now we have agenda item 14. Report of the Head of Policy and Communications, Housing and Environment, Key Performance Indicators. It's a lovely title, isn't it? 2017 to 18. Mrs Woodhouse, I believe you are presenting this. Be my guest.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This report sets out proposed key performance indicators for 2017-18 following the refresh of the strategic plan. There's also been a member workshops with officers to look at indicators for next year. The indicators are set out on page 10 at paragraph 3.3, and you will see a number of indicators for 2016-17 have been removed from the new list following feedback. And we've had a number of additions, so hopefully you can see the contrast. I would also like to highlight that the first 5 indicators under A Home for Everyone are actually being reported to Strategic Planning, Sustainability and Transportation Committee. So this committee may not wish to receive them as well, but you can. But it's something to be considered whether you'd like to see them as well or not. And they will all, in all likelihood, be going to Policy and Resources as well. So it's whether you want to see them. So we've got a bit of a reduction from where we are, and I'm happy to take questions on the indicators if you have any.
Okay. Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Please state page that
State
you'll be
page.
looking at. Thank you.
Right,
So
yeah,
helpful.
okay. On page 11, that's a good way to start. On page 11, we've got still, and it kind of baffled me a little bit, given the criteria that's on page 12 for these indicators. We've still got number of people successfully completing a course at the leisure centre following referral by a GP. Now, to my mind, it probably ticks 4 of the 5 boxes, but the one that to my mind, again, is most important is the relevance of a KPI and whether or not we have any control over it if we're displeased with the percentage or stat that's presented to us. This doesn't seem to be anything under our control. Yes, we own the leisure centre, we have no direct role in running it, we also don't have any direct role over what GPs decide to do and how many people they decide to refer. Our role as a housing authority in encouraging good health and well-being is surely to make sure that the housing in our borough is of a certain standard, that it does encourage those attributes. So I personally would like to see that one gotten rid of, and instead perhaps we could include a measure of the number of completed home hazard grants and a number of the completed home assistances as per our adopted housing assistance scheme that we had at this committee back in July. They are things I'm assuming that we do keep a tab of anyway, as they come under one of our own policies, and they more directly relate to the actual quality of housing in our borough, which is our role in health and well-being. Thank you.
Would you like to come back on that?
Yep, that's a fair comment. And in terms of the number of people successfully completing course at the leisure centre, currently it's there as contextual, because you're right, we aren't in control of it, but it's something that we have the information on, and it's relevant in terms of encouraging good health and well-being, but it's tricky with that action area in general, because there's only certain things we do that have an impact, but there are things that have an impact, and you're right, housing is the key one. With regard to the 2 suggested, I would have to go away and talk to the housing team and see, they will be collecting that data, it's just how often and coming up with a target, but I can bring that back for you at Q1, and I can talk to them about possible targets, and perhaps we can discuss that when I come back with the first report. Would that be appropriate?
Sorry, could someone, the blinds, I don't know which one it is. It's always such a shame to block out sunshine, but poor Angela. Do you want to come back on that? Yeah, will do. Thank you, Matt. Is that better? Thank you, Matt. Okay. Can I ask William to come in on that one, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Hear what you say about the one you're looking to remove. If you were looking to add another one, I think one that might be relevant to include would be the number of households in temporary accommodation at the end of the most recent month, and we could put a target around that. But it's a very, important one that is worth keeping a track on, because it's got big financial implications that follow it if that number starts to creep up. So I would certainly suggest that one if you were looking to make a replacement. Okay.
I would, Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, KPIs. I'm going to admit something here. I always get confused with KPIs. I'm sorry about it, but I do. Now, you set out the criteria, which is on page 12, and that's all very good. I fully understand that. But when I see something like number of completed disabled facilities grants, 100, I'm trying to get my head around what that really means. What is it actually being measured against? Is it good? Is it bad?
Yeah, that's good.
But it doesn't say here. Someone stranger coming into here. I'm only trying to, I'm not trying to critical, it's just trying to understand it, that's all.
Yes, if I can come back on that one. In terms of what we should be how we should be describing it is in terms of the amount of money that we have available and, percentage spend of that money. So I take the point you make, and we can craft some words around that, I think.
Councillor Burton again.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. In the same light, then, as the fact that we are measuring the number of successful disabled facilities grants, I've taken, I'm very grateful, actually, William, I think it's a perfect suggestion for a possible replacement for the one that I'm suggesting getting rid of. But I also think, considering they are schemes under the same policy that have an impact, I do also think we ought to look into the possibility of measuring the other two that I suggested as well.
Just for context, in the report we do include detail of what the indicator is about and what we're looking for, and following feedback from members at the workshop, we'll be trying to include some further detail around methodology, so that you'll have a clearer read of what's happened in past performance, what we're looking to achieve. We do use arrows to try and be a bit more supportive, but we'll provide some more contextual information for you as well.
Yeah, makes sense. I would just to ask a few things. The Safer Maidstone Partnership information down here is nothing really compared to what they brought up with both committees that we've had with the police and other agencies. So I'd like to see something more gripping. That why would we want to check the Safer Maidstone Partnership? What is we, as a council, looking at? And I don't think these sort of three fit that anymore. Not that I wouldn't like it to be these three things, but yeah, if you'd like to come in on that.
Thank you. The three that are listed are actually the partnership's priorities. So they're the areas they're prioritising for the next year, and they're areas we can get information to you on, and we're providing them as contextual information. You're right, your main role in holding them to account is when you meet as the Crime and Disorder Committee. So it tends to be that this information is given to you regularly, so you've got that ready for when you see them, and it's provided for context. But if there's other things you want, we can add in additional information and more information. But it is outside of our control because it's a Safer Maidstone Partnership, and I understand.
Yeah. Okay. The number of fly tips assessed within 2 working days. We seem to be going in so much detail for these sort of things. I'd just like to see things cleaned to the best of our ability, and I just don't want to put too much pressure on what we're expecting. You know, by keeping records, I just don't know. As you say, this isn't really for the public, because I don't think they'll have a clue of what actually is going on. And I think it's just a record, really, for councillors. Can I just have the streets clean, please, to the best of your ability with 30 staff? That's all I asked. That's my question.
Certainly, that's what we would always strive to do.
Of course.
The number of fly tips, I mean, previously I think there were 2 indicators, so we've tried to streamline them down to 1, because obviously, again, number of fly tips is not necessarily always in our control. You know, we take enforcement action, hence the new one we've added in that reflects more about the enforcement action we're taking rather than just the total number. We personally find it quite useful to have the target of 2 working days. It can be motivational to the workforce to say, look, you know, we're trying to keep it clean and keep it, you know, get it off the streets as quickly as possible. Obviously, that includes assessed within 2 working days, because there may be evidential value in that, and therefore, as long as we're out there checking it, and sometimes we can use that fly tip as also part of our communications campaign to put tape round it, make sure people are aware we're looking at it. If you go and dump waste on the highway, we will be looking, and if we can find evidence, we will then be prosecuting. So that one, obviously, it says to be confirmed, but we were looking at about an 88% target, which is building year on year in the area that we can achieve. So I think last year we were about 86%, so 88 is achievable. And I think, as I said, it will act motivational to the workforce to say, you know, we're trying to do this as quickly as possible, but we appreciate it's not going to be the second it's reported. It does take a little bit of time.
Okay. Number of reports of litter attended to. Just wondered if that was...
Yeah, that particular one, the last line, number of reports, of litter attended to, that come out of the member workshop. So there was some discussion about, it's almost looking at other people's actions.
No disrespect. Sorry, Derek, he wasn't there. No, can I just...
No, the only reason I was nodding my head is because I heard it had been agreed by members previously.
See, that come out of the member workshop, and in fact there was a big discussion about something which we thought probably be harder to measure, which is that when we cleared a spot, how long it takes for litter to reappear, but really you're measuring public behaviour rather than what we do about it. Okay. So we turn that into, number of reports of litter attended to, because that's something that really matters to the public, is when they spot litter and they report it to us, that we then clear it up quickly. But you don't have to measure it, you don't have to have that measure. I don't know if Jen would like to comment as well.
It sort of matches, obviously, the fly tipping one we had mentioned previously about us actually taking action and responding to residents' reports, whether that is fly tipping or whether that is litter. Obviously, with litter, the approach taken is it actually may be on a sweep. It may need a road closure if it's a high-speed road. Yeah. So actually the time to rectify won't always be the same amount of time as we discussed with fly tipping. You know, it's a set 2 working days. With this, it could range from, a day if it was in a high footfall area to a week if it was requiring, a lane closure or something along those, to multiple weeks if it was the A249, for example.
Okay, I'll give in. I don't mean I'm sort of giving in. I'm just realistic, and I see what's going on across the whole of the country. And I think it's just a shame that we're going to be holding you to ransom. Because I was away for a couple of days, and I must say this, and I've had a lot of journeys at the moment with hospitals, etc. And I often, when I'm being driven around, think, God, we're quite lucky here. I'm going to London twice a week, and that is bad. But I can still see the grass, and I just wonder what some councillors require is, because there's a bit of litter. And unless you could put the cleaner in a cupboard and he comes popping out every time someone drops a bit of litter, I just don't know. But all I'm saying is I'm quite proud of the borough, because I'm driving round with nothing else to look at apart from outside of a car, and I'm quite pleased with what I see. So I'd like you to take that back to the team. Okay. So anybody else on this KPIs? Councillor Byrne.
Sorry.
Nothing to be sorry about.
I'm going to go back to something that that you said earlier, Angela, about the first 5 indicators under a home for everyone. I think what this committee is concerned with is not the processing of planning applications, but is actually the outcome of those applications. So I could reconcile myself with the fact that there is a degree of relevance to numbers 4 and 5 on that list, albeit to a certain degree they sit outside of this committee's control, but they provide good background information to perhaps some of our homelessness strategies, etc. I don't think we should be having the double up of reporting of 1, 2 and 3, because we just don't deal with the planning side of it at this committee. One other thing I would like to say, and this is a little bit sort of left field, I suppose, is I couldn't believe it really when I flicked through this report and saw, as lovely as a report as it is, and I know how hard everybody has worked on this, officers, and actually we've sat round and discussed it a number of times now, but there's a full colour print of the strategic plan in here, and I know that this year and the year coming there will be a number of discussions in committees at this council on how we can make efficiencies, savings, and printing regularly comes up. Some of these cases are more controversial than others. I don't think it's at all controversial to suggest that every time the strategic plan is referenced, you know, we should all have our own personal copies of it anyway. We don't need a colour copy, as lovely as it is. We don't need a colour copy of it in the report.
Thank you very much. So if there's nothing else on this side, everybody, yeah, members, quite happy? Okay, thank you so much, Mrs Woodhouse and Anna. Thank you for the work that you've done, and thank you for coming along. And Jen, thank you. Yeah. So we're doing it block by block? Okay. So, can I just share yours, because you've got that open? So the committee can decide not to have any performance management information. This.
Sorry, you just want to read that, and then we'll just do block by block like this.
Oh, you want to do it block by block? Okay.
What ones you want in and what ones you want out.
That the following strategic plan key performance indicators be agreed for the Communities Housing Environment Committee for 2017-18. Providing a clean and safe environment. I think we've said what we've had to say. So do we agree with what's on the papers, including any of things that were brought up? Yeah? So can I ask for a proposer? Council? No?
You could do it all together.
Oh, can I just do that afterwards then? Encourage good health and well-being, percentage spent of disabled facilities grant. So everybody okay with that one? Yeah.
What were the two that you mentioned?
The two that I mentioned were number of completed home hazard grants and number of completed home assistances, because I don't think that's actually named as a grant, but they're both policies under the Housing Assistance Scheme.
And housing assistances.
Yeah, housing assistances. Yeah.
Chairman, can I just before you go, wasn't there one that William suggested as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
We said that one. That was the percentage.
That was the percentage spent to the disabled facilities.
And the number of households in temporary accommodation.
Yeah, which we got that under the next one. Okay, so everybody okay with them changes? Yeah? Agreed? Good. And Anna, and the third one, a home for everybody, to add a number of households in temporary accommodation at the end of the month.
Councillor Burton, did you, you wanted the first four taken off?
It was the first three. I could sort of reconcile myself with numbers 4 and 5 on the list.
You still want them?
Yeah.
I think it says there that we have to share that anyway, because this is the way it is. That's why nothing gets done, because it keeps being chucked around. Yeah. So I think we have to keep it as it is. Sorry, Matt. Yeah. I'm just as disappointed as you.
If I may, I think...
Okay, can I... Yeah.
I think Angela did actually say that even though they are reported to SPS&T, we don't necessarily have to have the carbon copies of them come in our reports as well. So they still be reported, but we don't have to read through them, if that makes some sense. But, I mean, it's a bit pedantic at that point, but... Yeah.
I think at the moment, there's certain things that do need looking at committees, where they go, what they're doing. I think after 2 years, it's really beginning to tell. So hopefully whoever does whatever next year will actually be positive, so that actions can start actually getting done. So anyway, so now we're going to...
Can we just have a proposer and seconder?
A proposer and seconder and all these... yeah. Councillor Burton, seconder. Councillor Richard. Councillor Webb, I am so sorry. Yeah, well, it normally is Richard, isn't it? I like being friendly. Yeah, so can we have a vote on that, please? Yes. Unanimous. Thank you very much, everybody. You okay? Yeah? Good one. So now we're changing. We're bringing this one forward. So agenda item 15, report of Edinburgh Environment and Public Realm tackling antisocial behaviour related to dogs, updating our enforcement tools. Mr. James, I presume you're doing this. So if you'd like to fire away.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, councillors. So I'm here tonight to seek your approval to start the formal processes of introducing a public space protection order, or actually 3 public space protection orders in relation to dog control. Dog control in this country is relatively unique in the fact that local authorities are given the power to create their own laws, which was originally introduced under the Clean Neighbourhood and Environment Act as dog control orders. And in 2013, Maidstone introduced 2 dog control orders, one for fouling and the other one for exclusion from the crematorium and enclosed children's play areas. I'm here tonight to seek your permission to start the formal process, which involves public consultation, but also to ask your agreement on increasing the fine related to dog-related offences to £100 from the £75 we currently issue. And for us to implement the public space protection orders without necessarily returning to committee unless there's significant, relevant public outcry, shall we say, which we don't anticipate. We're very lucky to have many thousands of responsible dog owners in this borough, and unfortunately there are still a small minority of irresponsible ones. So the idea behind the public space protection order is to maintain those powers so that my officers are equipped to deal with those that they catch being irresponsible. We are minded that we don't want to introduce any powers that a responsible dog owner wouldn't naturally do anyway. So we're not asking for anything that we wouldn't expect any reasonable dog owner to undertake. And we believe that the current exclusion orders around children's play area, there are a couple of play areas in the borough, one of which is our own at the Cobtree Park, where the dog exclusion doesn't apply because it's not physically enclosed by a fence or a hedge. Because of the way that parks have been developed now, they're very much more open plan, and we think that we can achieve the same level of control, same level of protection for those areas by good signage and maps in those locations.
Thank you, Martin. Val, would you like to approach?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to come and make a comment. In general, I totally support this, but actually what I would like to see is much more public enforcement. I'd like the public to see enforcement happening. I've got dogs. I clear up. I walk with a bunch of people. If we see one of the other person's dogs do a doodle and they haven't seen it, we tell each other. We tell other dog walkers. So we do try to be responsible. The problem is those that don't clear up, it doesn't matter if you charge them £1,000, they still don't clear up. So really, with the litter in the town, as Councillor Ring referred, I'm really proud now. We've got so little litter in our town. There was a lot of uproar at the beginning when people got fined, but I'm sorry, if you don't drop it, you won't get fined. So I would really like us to have a bit of a purge on this and do some high-profile cases of catching people, if we can. I know it's not an easy thing to do. More public, more visible patrols, and try the ones we do catch, get it out there in the press and absolutely say, we will catch you and we will fine you. Because those of us that do, I hope we consider ourselves responsible and we clear up. We do find it frustrating because the other people give us a bad name. So I would say generally totally supportive, and I think within the cemetery that's absolutely fair game to have dogs on a lead. I think that's quite acceptable. There was some comment in the survey where some people were asking for dogs to be, or to have dogs on leads areas in parks. Now, funnily enough, Bearsted Wood and Trust gets a mention in the report because it's been a real hot potato in my patch, and they've sort of divided it into 2/3, 1/3, and one third you can have your dogs off the lead. So the 2/3 you have to have them on a lead. And it's caused a lot of upset, and most people ignore it. I don't go in the area now, so it's taken away 2/3 of my walking space, because if my dogs are on a lead and they're approached by dogs off a lead, they are aggressive because they're captive. So if I try and do the right thing with my dogs on a lead and someone else's dog runs up, I've now got a problem. So what's happened is I don't walk in 2/3 of the area I used to walk in, and it's caused a huge amount of upset. So I'd be very, very against the introduction of dogs on leads areas in general. I would rather see us try and promote a sort of atmosphere of more enforcement and people being encouraged to report people that are being irresponsible. So I think that was mainly sort of the comments that I wanted to say. But generally, I mean, I am in support, but I'm just would like to see more enforcement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and thank you for coming along to voice. It's Martin, could you answer any of that, please?
Thanks, Councillor Spring. It's nice to get support back from. I mean, I'm sure all the board members around the table would agree that enforcement of this area is quite important. I think from our point of view, the issue with dog fouling enforcement is that we do actively pursue it. The same guys that are out there doing litter, we also deploy for doing fouling. We've got it on one of our working plans to look at potentially doing some covert more covert work around parks, using either our own officers or the Kingdom officers. Because we know that, and it's one of the reasons one of the things we could have included in here was a requirement for people to carry bags, but we know from our enforcement work already that people carry bags because they think they might get stopped. And if they do get stopped or challenged, they'll produce a bag. But it doesn't mean that they weren't going to pick it up if they weren't challenged. So there are lots of kind of issues that we face as enforcement officers around catching people being irresponsible. Actually, dogs on leads is an interesting one because there is some work that's been done that suggests that actually if you have more dogs on lead areas, you would reduce the amount of fouling because there's a distance requirement. If someone is detached from the problem, they have the opportunity to turn their back on their responsibility. But I absolutely agree that a dog held on a lead is a very different animal to a dog that's running loose. And it's an area that we did give some consideration to, and we just didn't feel that it was necessarily proportionate to look at dog on lead areas, particularly because one of the other powers that's provided by the Antisocial Behaviour Crime and Policing Act was a community protection power that allows officers to make more specific requirements of an individual dog owner as opposed to lots of dog owners. So we can actually sort of, where there are incidents, we can actually target those individuals and require them to be kept on a lead in public and to be muzzled. And actually we can require them to attend behaviour classes as well. The owners and the dogs, obviously.
Muzzled?
And I think that's an issue because it's actually the behaviour it's not the dog's fault. It's not the dog's problem. It's the owner that becomes a problem. From our officer's point of view and where members can really help my team is in promoting this is that the cure to dealing with dog fouling is actually the communities themselves. Because with the exception of parks like Cobtree or Moat Park, these are people living in those communities. They are the neighbours. And we use a programme called Dog Watch, where we use the same premise as Neighbourhood Watch to encourage people in that area to grass on their neighbours. To basically come forward with information in confidence to say, we believe that a particular dog owner is a problem. And then we will target that area by postcard in the houses or by... and hopefully one of those postcards will go through the door of the person responsible, which will hopefully warn them off in the first place. But then we rely on the intelligence of people to come forward and say, it is that person, it's that time of day. And actually, so far this year, we're averaging 1 FPN a month for dog fouling, which is quite high for us. And I think we issued 12 last year overall. So we're still on that kind of pattern, but we did issue more in the summer last year and were quieter in the winter. But most of those FPNs, except where the litter enforcement officers have got lucky, been in the right place at the right time when the dog decided to go to the toilet and the person in front of an officer decided not to pick up. All the other enforcement has come through people giving us that intelligence so that we can be in the right place at the right time. So what I would ask members is to really encourage your constituents to come forward and give that intelligence as best as we can, so that my officers can be in the right place at the right time, because resources is, we don't have an army, but what we do have is an army of residents if we need them.
I'll quickly come back, very quickly.
Oh, of course you can.
Thank you. If you want to do a little covert operation, I'll give you somewhere in Bearsted where some delightful person is actually picking up their poo and then lobbing it into the churchyard in one particular corner to make a protest that the bin's been taken away. And I've even thought about arranging a group stakeout of people taking it in turns because it's so angered people. It's just making a pathetic point. Could we publicise that snitch line, whatever you want to call it? I don't know what you call it, but where you report people. I'd like to see a little bit of publicity on that, actually. I think that's a really good idea. So, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Martin, would you like to come back quickly on that?
We definitely will. We're hoping that actually this consultation in itself will get some public attention. It's very difficult to get the local newspapers to run stories that relating to incidents of dog fouling unless it's beating us up about it rather than celebrating what we've done that's good.
Support.
But we've got our own Facebook page, which is Responsible Canines Maidstone. and we publicise all of our successes on there. Derek's a big fan. But we also, one of our favourite tricks at the moment is we've got a new stencil that says fine issued here. We've used that 6 times now, which is good, and we'll hopefully be able to put one of those in Bearsted for you when we catch them.
Okay. I have got Councillor Mortimer.
Thank you. I fully support what's on the papers. Personally, I think if going forward, we could strengthen it a bit more. What I really wanted to mention is in the last fortnight, I've had brought to my attention 3 dog instances. One near where I live, a lady was jumped on by some large dogs, an elderly lady at Long Miller's Wharf. At Tovel, there's a jogger being chased and nipped in South Park by a dog off the lead. And reports of a lot of dog mess, etc., and unruly dogs in King George V at Lewes as well, which I think is a parish area up there. And the lady that lives near me reported about the dog. She was sort of like, not attacked, let's put it, she was scratched and surrounded by 4 dogs, you know what I mean? And she's elderly, probably in her 80s, so it's very concerning for people. And it's near a play area. This is another thing as well, and it's a grass open space which should be, for public enjoyment. So.
Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, I'm speaking as a cat owner, so it probably doesn't apply. But I totally support this. I think it's a very good idea. My issue is, I suppose, and it's what I think Councillor Springett was hinting at as well, I don't know how on earth you do enforce this, actually. I think it's really difficult. Every time I go canvassing or knocking on doors, one of the biggest complaints people make time and time again, not just in my ward, but in other wards as well, is dog mess. It comes up on almost a regular basis. And it's not just in public parks, it's in rural areas as well. And we've got a big Jubilee field which has a lot of football pitches on it, and it's a major issue, dogs fouling on football pitches, And whilst I understand the idea of reporting, neighbours reporting, a lot of people are very reluctant to do this because some people can get quite aggressive on it, and I think you need to bear that one in mind. So it's not that's not an easy option, I think, for a lot of people. I mean, I've been in Moat Park, and I've personally been knocked over by a dog. So I'm sympathise with the idea of having them on leads, because I had no chance of this. It was a very big dog, and I ended up on the floor. So it's not great. I wasn't drinking, William. So
I'm not going to say anything.
So I think there are big issues here, but it's the enforcement one that does kind of worry me, because unless you put a lot of effort into it, I'm not sure how you can do it. I mean, you can have secure cameras and pick people up. I know it's another option, but there's not an easy answer to this, I suspect. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Bernard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As the Chair knows, I've had a lot of problems with this, and I think I spoke to you, Martin, didn't I, earlier in the year with regards particularly to Senacre and parts of Shetway. The multi-bins have made a big difference that have gone in there now. But I personally think this fine doesn't go far enough. I would like to see a fine of £200. I don't think £100 is anywhere near enough.
We can't. It's going against the law.
So would I. Unfortunately, you can only introduce the legislation that the PSPOs are capped at £100 as a fixed penalty, which is strange because government are looking at potentially a £150 fine for littering. So it's not quite. One of the reasons for bringing this report was because we thought it was disproportionate to have a £75 fine for dog fouling and an £80 for littering, and actually we would rather the same. I mean, one of the things is that the maximum fine is actually £1,000, but the FPN, the fixed penalty notice, is something that we offer to avoid the expense of taking cases through a court. So we have taken 2-3 fouling prosecutions in the last 12 months. Again, would love to publicise them more, but it's what the newspapers will run with, whether or not they want to publicise it. But we're hopeful that a campaign like this would really help. But we're also, just to take up the points from the other councillors, if I may, around, you're absolutely right, enforcement is very, very difficult, and it does require a skill, but also a bit of fortune. We always say to people that if they come forward, there are people that will come forward and quite happily will name and shame people, and if they're happy to, we'll take a witness statement and we'll take enforcement action on the back of their statement. In other cases, it's just as simple as it's a brown, nondescript dog that's always walking down this road at this time. The owner always wears red shoes. Something as simple as that will at least enable the officers to target someone. With cameras, we're quite restricted because it's not considered a high enough offence. We can't use covert surveillance because you can't get the approval to deploy cameras for that level of offence. We can use overt cameras, but it's a bit of a grey area. And I suppose the principle is it's exactly the same as Neighbourhood Watch. If you want to protect your neighbourhood, you will come forward with information. If you're too concerned, then you won't. But hopefully there's enough responsible. And we've got a massive following on Facebook now of people that are more than ready to jump on people and offer them bags first and then offer their name to us second, hopefully.
Would you like to come back, John? Sorry.
Yes, please, Madam Chair. I accept what you're saying, Martin, that, we can't put it up any higher than £100. But the interesting bit I wanted to ask is this business about maximum fine through prosecution is £1,000. When do you take them to prosecution? Is it if they don't pay their fines, or is there any leeway to take a persistent offender to prosecution?
You must be reading our enforcement policy because that's exactly what it says. The FPN is there, the fixed penalty notice is there to offer a first-time offender or someone, a first-time offender the opportunity to avoid going for prosecution, because obviously through prosecution there's a criminal record and it's obviously the risk of a higher fine, and it's much more efficient and cost savings for us to go through the FPN route. But if someone is a persistent offender, I caught more than once, or there's evidence that they're more persistent than on the one occasion, and we wouldn't issue a fixed penalty, we would go straight for prosecution anyway. And if someone is, the fixed penalty notice is offered, much like the litter ones, they're offered as an alternative, and if someone doesn't accept the alternative, then we will take them to prosecution. And there's kind of an attitude stroke behavioural check there. If someone isn't compliant when the officer deals with them, is aggressive or violent towards them, then we would seek prosecution every time.
Okay. Councillor Joy.
Thank you. I welcome the report, and it is a shame that it couldn't be more, but we have what we've got, so I'll go with it. But I will say, living where I do near Moat Park, which is a direct route, I would say it has definitely got better over the years. You used to just go out your gate and it was everywhere. So people are beginning to come round to it. Now, I'll apologise in advance, but on the recommendations, just before we go and vote, Madam Chair, can I just have some clarification on page 27 on 1? It says that approval is given to undertake formal consultation for a 1-month period on the introduction of 3 public space protection orders. Can you just clarify what those 3 public spaces are, please, before I vote?
Okay. Yep, sure, no problem. The public space protection is one would be a public space protection order on dog fouling. So that would be a borough-wide offence to fail to remove dog faeces from the land. The second would be a dog exclusion order, which would be to exclude dogs from all children play areas, whether fenced, hedged or signed. And the third is the the dog on lead requirement in Maidstone Cemetery.
Yeah. Is there anybody else that would like to ask any questions, members? No. Well, I think it's been quite a good discussion. No matter wherever we go or whatever we do, I think it is something that I don't think we'll ever completely cure, but we're really giving it a good go. So I'm quite happy with what's been brought before us tonight. So would you like me to take them one by one, or are we quite happy to take all three recommendations? You're quite happy with that, everybody? So can I have a proposer, please? John Bernard, Councillor Bernard, yes. And a seconder, please. Councillor Mortimer. And can I vote on this? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Martin, for your coming along. And thank you, Jane. A very good report. Thank you. So now, members, we'll be going to the urgent item, which we all changed around, will be item 13, the housing white paper. And that will be done by William Cornell.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I thought, because obviously everyone's, got the paper to hand if they would have liked to have read it, and there's various sort of summaries out there. So I thought probably the best way to approach it would be for me just to maybe spend 5-10 minutes, kind of talk you all through what I consider to be the main points and how we will compile a formal response on behalf of the whole council and take that forward. So the white paper was published in February of this year, and what we are proposing is that we will respond, as it is a consultation document. The deadline is early May, I think it's the 2nd of May, and what we have agreed is that we will, as officers, draft the responses and run that response past the chair of the Strategic Planning Committee, David Burton, and Marion as the chair of this committee. But, we've had a session with the Strategic Planning Committee where they've had a chance to sort of input ideas and views on the paper, and hopefully we can use this session now to do the same here. So the issues that have brought about the white paper, some of the points that are drawn out within it is that really within England not enough houses are being built. On average, since the 1970s, only 160,000 homes have been built per annum, and all the sort of academic thinking suggests that it should be much more of that, between 225,000 and 275,000 per annum, to sort of address the shortfall that's accrued and deal with the rising population. Also, there's a few sort of sound bites in there, some commentary from the Council of Mortgage Lenders, which says that by 2020, only a quarter of those under 30 will own their home. But in terms of those people that are coming up to retirement age now, more than half of those were able to own their home at the age of 30. So it's just a sort of illustration of how things are changing. And also, it says that back in the 1990s, it would take a typical couple 3 years to save for a reasonable deposit for a property, and that is now unbelievably at 24 years to save a deposit. So that's where you're starting to see all these sort of deposit schemes come in from the government and the Bank of Mum and Dad and so on. So really, it sort of crystallises into three key problems. Not enough local authorities are planning for the new homes that they need. They're not doing the local plan process in a timely manner. Secondly, that house building generally is too slow, and that the construction industry and house building industry is too reliant on a small number of large players. So they're the three bits that the white paper is sort of aimed at resolving. So it then goes into the main body of the report, and it sets out 4 steps, which I'll talk you through briefly. And step 1 is planning for the right homes in the right places. So it's going to put an emphasis on updating local plans, simplifying the plan-making process. I think we've all seen here at Maidstone how difficult and costly and time-consuming that's been, so they're looking to make that process simpler, bringing in a more standardised approach for assessing objectively assessed housing need. Also, they're talking about bringing in a register of what land is actually available for development, not only in terms of ownership, but in terms of what options property companies have over that land, to make sure that local plans are anchored in the reality as to what land is actually available for development. There's going to be an emphasis on brownfield land, as always, being prioritised for development, and also, interestingly, an emphasis on surplus public land being made available for the development of housing, and you can see we're already doing our bit here at Maidstone on that front. It talks about bolstering neighbourhood planning, and we have a number of parishes that have those in place, and also it talks very much about increasing further the density of housing built on available land, and we can see we sort of come up against those challenges as well in the planning committee. The next step that's set out is building homes faster. They want to give greater certainty to those local authorities that have planned for new homes, and so not changing the goalposts, and I guess Maidstone comes into that category with our local plan being well advanced. They also talk about boosting capacity within local authority planning departments, and we'll come back to that in a bit. They have also, the government created a £2.3 billion infrastructure fund, and this is about making money available to front-load infrastructure that makes land more developable for housing. So this could be paying for roundabouts and roads to be put in, and the money coming back as development is built out. It talks about getting the behaviour of utility companies more under control, so they do things faster and don't hold up development. Also, it talks very much about tackling planning delays. So we're under scrutiny as the local authority. And whilst, we tend to measure ourselves, and we've seen it tonight with the KPIs about, do we process our planning applications within the 13 weeks and what have you. But believe me, coming from a development background, that's only, what's the term? You get your planning permission, and that is the end of the beginning. It's not the end of the end, so to speak. You then have to get into all your pre-commencement conditions, your Section 106 agreement, and that is what really stretches out the timeline. Marion, you were talking about why does it take so long for housing sites to get on site. They're really looking to put pressure on local authorities so that we can do everything within our power to make it quicker to bring sites forward for development and actually get building. It talks about the skills shortage, which I guess will only be exacerbated with Brexit potentially, in terms of the skills within the construction sector. That's a risk, and they'll be looking to construction companies to do more in terms of apprenticeships to build the next workforce. It's going to give local authorities opportunities to hold developers to account in terms of delivery. So it talks about shorter planning consents, so they've got to get on site quicker. It talks about the fact that we could then look at the track record of a developer and their proposed build-out rates when it comes to assessing their planning applications, which is an interesting concept. Personally, I'm not so convinced it's a workable one. And also there's going to be a lot more scrutiny on local authorities. So it's not just going to be enough for us to say, OK, we've got our local plan in place, we can put our feet on the desk and sort of relax. They want to be making sure that those numbers are actually coming through, and if the numbers aren't coming through in terms of homes built, they'll be putting measures on us to show what we're doing to remedy the situation. So moving on quickly again, then step 3, diversifying the market. And I think this one is quite interesting. Back in 2008, before the recession, 28% of all the homes built were built by small and medium-sized enterprises, and that sector of the market was really sort of decimated in the recession, and today it's only 12% of all the homes built are built by small, medium-sized contractors. And so what that really means is that whole housing delivery is starting to be sort of tied up in the hands of just a handful of big boys, as you call them. And so the government's trying to do things to stimulate new entrants into house building and construction, and also for those ones that are there still but struggling, putting together support packages so they can sort of expand better. And those support packages are in the form of cheap development finance being lent from the government to the construction sector, which is quite interesting. Also talks about trying to get investment in what it terms modern methods of construction. So rather than houses being built the way they always have been for many, decades, and people with spades and wheelbarrows, which hasn't moved on from that much, they're trying to sort of promote building properties off-site in factories and bringing them on the back of the lorries to site. And
I must admit, they do look quite good, the ones I've seen on TV.
Absolutely. So, and the final step, there's an emphasis on helping people now. So all these, it's acknowledging that the 3 first steps are going to take time to come to fruition. So what does the white paper suggest for helping people now? Well, it's going to carry on incentivising low-cost home ownership through Help to Buy and starter homes. It's putting more money into social housing grant for housing associations and local authorities to build more affordable housing. And positively, the last sort of regime of David Cameron and Osborne were very much into that money only being available for home ownership products. That's now being expanded back out to be for rented housing as well. And I think that is going to work for all local authorities and help us manage our sort of homelessness problems that we're all working to deal with. It talks about fairness for tenants and leaseholders, and meeting the needs of the future population and ageing population, doing more to bring about different housing products that work for that particular sector of society, and also about improving work around homelessness, and we've already seen that coming to fruition, I think, through the Homelessness Reduction Bill, which we did a briefing on only last month. So just by way of a summary, I think that the good things and the things to be aware of within the white paper for Maidstone is it means higher planning fees. So already we can get a 20% increase on our planning fees, and there is the potential of a further 20% on top of that if we can meet, we can demonstrate that we are exceeding the number of houses that we would reasonably be expected to build. So that's something for consideration. It's also, there's money available through what it calls capacity funding, and this is really for strategic planning work, local plan type work. I'm pleased to say that we've already been a beneficiary of this pot of government money, and we secured 75,000 at the end of the last financial year to help unlock major developments in Lenham and Springfield. So we'll be having our eye out for future rounds of that kind of funding. And finally, I think that I thought what was quite interesting, and I personally like the look of it, it's talking about expanding some of the powers that local authorities have if they're having more of a role in land assembly and disposal. For example, we're already acquiring, we've acquired land at the Maidstone East Station, and it now means that we would have the same kind of abilities as a development corporation, whereby we could grant planning consents that third parties that could then go on to implement. So doing more in terms of land assembling, granting planning consents that others could take forward. And I think that would certainly play into our sort of broader regeneration aspirations. So that's really a very quick run through. There's obviously plenty more in there, but it is quite technical in terms of the questions that have been posed. There's 38 questions, and we will respond to all of them. But I think it's fair to say, having discussed it, with our wider leadership team and the sort of first round at strategic planning last week, I think the feeling is it's a positive step, positive paper, supports a lot of the things that we're already looking to do. But I'm, very open-minded as to, what everyone would say here this evening, and we can, I'm sure, capture specific thoughts that people would like to see go within our response. Thank you.
Thank you very much, William. Councillor Perry.
Thank you, William. That was a very good presentation. I think it's I read the paper with interest, actually, and one of the things that I couldn't find in it, and it's interesting, you mentioned about the shortening the time on applications between getting permission and having to act. Yeah. And it's gone down from 3 to 2 years, I think, if I looked at it. But what fascinated me was that, we got experience of this, that someone only has to dig a hole or put a shed at the side, and the application stays on. So I'm not actually sure. I couldn't see anything in that that covered that particular point, because it always seems to be a bit of a trick on developers to keep the thing open. Yeah. Anyway, that was just an observation, but the rest you've covered very, very well. Thank you.
Councillor Bernard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It was a very good presentation, William. Thank you. Like John, I'm not quite sure if I missed this. We were talking about things that developers have got to do. Was there anything in there which I might have missed, where developers buy land and sit on it for years? There's one stretch of land at Lenham which was bought by a developer 6 years ago, and it's still sitting there and nothing's happening to it. Is there anything in this white paper where they intend to force developers to use this land quicker and not sit on it? We know the reason why, because it's all money. And the other thing is, I'm pleased to see also in there the bit about local authorities being able to start building their own again. Housing associations have done a very good job, but I think it's got to the stage now that local authorities should start, getting back to what they were supposed to do. They still do it in London, but unfortunately, in a lot of the rural places, that's stopped now.
Thank you, Councillor Barnard. In terms of taking action against those developers, you can't, I don't think there's ever going to be a situation where you can force someone to build, but, if they've gone through the process of getting a planning application, which obviously is a huge investment on their part in terms of time and consultancy fees, I guess this white paper, tries to apply a lever, doesn't it, to make them start building quicker. But I think that's really the only lever that you do have. Obviously, there's other things, more drastic measures, isn't there, CPO and development orders and all that kind of thing, but they exist already. But I think it's very much sort of focused around the planning consents and so on. And yes, in terms of the point you make about encouraging local authorities to build, that's good words in there. I was a little bit disappointed because it didn't really have a lot in terms of financial incentives to get local authorities doing that. You know, it's the right signal, I suppose.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I agree with you, William. I would have liked to have seen something in there about financial incentives for local authorities to do it, but I think it's a step forward, and let's hope it can progress from there, because I think it's certainly needed for local authorities, particularly in the rural areas now, to get back to actually building council houses.
Yeah. Yeah. Councillor Mortimer.
Thank you. Basically, I mean, my problem at the moment is with delivery of housing and the speed it's actually being built. I understand that this council is sitting on around about 5,000, 6,000 properties at the moment that could actually be built tomorrow, where the 106 has been agreed and everything. So even with this new white paper, and again going back to Councillor Perry's point, you can build a house here, but what's happening now in the market is the builder is only building that house for that deposit that's been put there. They're not building 50 homes and then advertising like the olden days. They're actually building till they get their money, which is keeping the price up, which is affordability of private. We all know what deposits youngsters are trying to find nowadays: 40, 50, 60,000 pounds for a two-bedroom new property on one of our new sites. So essentially, although the white paper is all very good and everybody thought it was going to be a magic wand, it isn't, because it will not. We're still dependent upon the developer and making the money and that sort of business and the profit. So.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Mortimer. I think that is one of the constraints with this sort of so much power being in the hands of a small number of developers. And one of the themes that comes out within the white paper is trying to promote further build to rent and having private rented sector housing as a designated use class within planning consents. And I think that might go some way to address that particular issue. So it talks about sort of trying to tap into all that money that's available from institutional investors, the pension funds and so on, trying to track that money into the private rented sector, and then we're not going to be so restricted on, the housing only gets built if it can be sold to individual purchasers. So that is one theme within the paper that hopefully will do something on that front.
That's okay. And what's the position with right to buy at the moment? Because essentially it undermines housing associations at the end of the day, and it sort of like it puts more pressure on local authorities as well. So is that dead in the water now, or is there still some promotion behind that?
Thank you. Well, certainly the right to buy remains for local authorities, as always. It has, within the white paper, it does even go in to say that the right to buy will be extended to local authority housing companies as well. And I thought, oh my God, here we go, this is really bad news. Because obviously we have our own Maidstone Property Holdings, which is going to be building these properties we discussed earlier this evening, but they have clarified that the right to buy will only be applicable to affordable housing developed, not market rented housing. So that's the local authority position. I think, the right to buy will become widespread within the housing association sector too. But I gather at the moment it's still kind of in sort of geographical trial phases, but I expect it will get there in the end. But again, it's all reducing the stock, and it manifests itself in these growing housing waiting lists that we're seeing across the southeast.
Yeah. Any more questions, anybody? I think my only question is, and it sort of goes back to what Matt was bringing up earlier. We have our committees and we have our roles. I was just wondering if we can eventually, in English, know what our role is towards this, because the homelessness comes under us to try and find homes for people, regardless of what that is, whether that is a house or a room for a night. And it's very mixed up with the other committee, which I'm hearing that we're treading on their toes. And we're not actually treading on their toes. It is our right to question what that committee are doing to get these things moving, because our responsibility is for the homelessness. And that homelessness regards everybody, anybody that needs anything, whether that's to buy a house, whether it's to rent a house. So I think we really need to point out that what our committee role is, and we must be questioning our other committee, hey, this is what we're responsible for. What are you actually doing to build these homes? So am I getting that across, members, as right as it should be? It isn't a case of stepping on toes. It's a case of we're responsible for homeless people. And we need that group to be, that committee to be actually doing it. Councillor Burton.
I was really just going to say I quite agree. I'm sat here with a number of questions buzzing around my head, things I want clarifying, even sort of opinion-based things where I wanted to get somebody else's take on it. But I'm sat here thinking, actually, well, is that a bit SPS&T or is that us? Oh, no, it's not really homelessness. Maybe looking forward to the new municipal year is something we ought to be referring to Democracy Committee to actually put something in our constitution that shores up where the roles of certain committees ends, because it is something that comes up fairly regularly. But we're going a bit left field maybe, but yeah, quite agree with you.
Okay then, thank you very much. Thank you for a good report. Can I just check also from the committee members, are we still having a great big get-together over this, or are you quite happy? I'm quite happy with what you brought tonight. Again, that's our responsibility as that committee.
First of all, I had in my mind that we would kind of bring the members of both committees together for a briefing along the lines that I've just done this evening. But in the end, we, through consultation with the two chairs, we decided to do it this route, which I think has been equally fine. You know, the next step is that the officers will compile the responses to the 38 questions, and that response will be signed off by both chairs, and in it goes. But if anyone wanted to, we could, of course, share the responses, or we will do that anyway.
Yeah. Okay then. Sorry, Joy.
Saying that there is a meeting booked for the 20th. Has that been cancelled? Fantastic. My anniversary.
Oh, bless. That's important, very important. Okay then. She's honest. Okay, members. Well, this is our last meeting in this year, so I would like to say it's been a pleasure working with you over all these months. I think we have got a lot done, and it would be nice to see for the future where this committee resolves again. Okay then, thank you very much and good night.